The Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado operates under a code older than any written regulation. Trust your team, protect your brothers, and never underestimate what stands between you and danger. For years, the K-9 unit operated in the shadows of SEAL training, respected by handlers, tolerated by command, but never truly integrated into the Brotherhood. Dogs were tools, assets, four-legged equipment that followed orders and detected threats. They weren't warriors, they weren't SEALs. That perception shattered on an October morning when a Belgian Malinois named Titan became the only barrier between an armed intruder and 200 sleeping trainees. What began as dismissive jokes about just a dog became a lesson in loyalty that no amount of Hell Week could teach. By the time the sun rose over the Pacific, Titan had done what few humans could: detect, engage, and neutralize a threat that bypassed every security protocol the Navy had in place. This is the story of how one K-9's instinct exposed a dangerous gap in base security, how his handler defied direct orders to trust what the dog knew, and how their partnership redefined what it means to be part of the teams. It's about the moment when courage wore fur, when protocol failed, and when the institution learned that sometimes the most dangerous assumption is believing you already know who your warriors are. The case would force naval special warfare to confront uncomfortable questions about security, hierarchy, and the intelligence they had been ignoring. And it would prove that in the space between order and action, between human certainty and animal instinct, lives can be saved or lost in seconds. Chapter 1. The Handler and the Hound. That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. Petty Officer First Class. Marcus Webb had been handling military working dogs for 6 years, but Titan was different. The 3-year-old Belgian Malinois didn't just follow commands, he anticipated them. During explosive detection drills, Titan would freeze 2 seconds before Webb even registered the scent signature. During patrol exercises, the dog's ears would swivel toward threats Webb's trained eye hadn't yet identified. The other handlers called it instinct. Webb called it partnership. The Naval Special Warfare Center sprawled across 460 acres of California coastline, home to Bud S training, SEAL team facilities, and enough classified infrastructure to warrant 3 security checkpoints and rotating guard posts. K-9 units patrolled the perimeter twice daily, dawn and dusk, following predetermined routes that command had calculated down to the minute. Webb had logged the pattern in his first week, too predictable, too rigid, too confident in fences and cameras. He'd mentioned it once to his supervisor, Senior Chief Ramirez, who'd responded with the institutional answer, "We've been doing it this way for 20 years, Webb. The system works. But systems only work until they don't." At 04:30 hours, Webb clipped Titan's tactical vest and headed toward the southeast perimeter. The October air carried the salt-sharp smell of ocean and the distant hum of helicopters preparing for morning drills. Titan moved with controlled precision, his black and tan coat barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, nose working the breeze in systematic sweeps. They were 40 meters from Checkpoint Echo when Titan stopped, not slowed, stopped. His entire body went rigid, ears forward, head lowered in the classic alert posture that meant one thing: threat detected. Webb's hand went to his radio, but Titan was already moving, not toward the checkpoint but perpendicular to it, angling toward a maintenance access road that shouldn't have foot traffic at this hour. "Titan, heel!" Webb commanded, but the dog ignored him. That never happened. Webb followed, unclipping his sidearm. Pulse accelerating. Titan led him 50 meters off the patrol route to a section of chain-link fence near the vehicle depot. In the weak glow of a distant floodlight, Webb saw what his eyes had missed, but Titan's nose had found. A section of fence cut clean. The links pulled back just enough for a person to slip through, fresh boot prints in the dirt, leading toward the barracks. Webb's radio crackled. K93, status report, you're off route. He pressed the transmit button. Dispatch, this is K93. I have a fence breach, southeast quadrant near the depot. Fresh entry point, active intrusion suspected. Static. Then Senior Chief Ramirez's voice, irritated and skeptical. Webb, you're 40 meters off your assigned patrol. Return to route and complete your circuit. We'll send maintenance to check the fence at 0700. Chief, Titan's tracking. Boot prints are fresh. Someone's on base. Petty Officer, your dog probably smelled a coyote. Return to patrol route. That's an order. Webb looked down at Titan. The dog's focus hadn't wavered. His nose was locked on the trail, body vibrating with controlled intensity. Every line of the Malinois screamed, "There's someone here. Trust me." In 6 years of handling, Webb had learned one absolute truth. When Titan alerted, Titan was right. He made the decision in 2 seconds. Copy that, Chief. Returning to route. He released the radio button and whispered to Titan, "Find." The dog surged forward into the darkness, and Webb followed, knowing he'd just violated a direct order, knowing his career might end before sunrise, but knowing with absolute certainty that something was wrong and Titan was the only one who could stop it. Chapter 2. The Intruder. The barracks complex housed 200 SEAL candidates in various stages of training, arranged in 3 parallel buildings with communal showers, equipment bays, and a central courtyard used for morning muster. At 0445 hours, most trainees were still asleep, exhausted from the previous day's conditioning drills and underwater exercises. Security protocol assumed any threat would come from the perimeter. Fences, gates, checkpoints. The idea that someone could breach the outer defenses and reach the barracks undetected was considered nearly impossible. Titan tracked the scent for 300 meters, moving with silent purpose through shadows between buildings. Webb stayed 5 paces behind, weapon drawn, scanning for movement. The boot prints continued along a maintenance path, bypassing the main walkways. Heading directly toward Barracks Charlie, Webb's radio crackled again. K93, your GPS shows you near the barracks complex. Explain your position. He ignored it. Ahead, Titan had stopped at a side entrance to Barracks Charlie, a service door that required keycard access. The door was closed but not latched. Someone had bypassed the electronic lock. Webb's training screamed at him to call for backup, to wait for armed response. But Titan was already nosing the door open, and the scenario timeline was accelerating too fast for protocol. Inside, the hallway stretched 40 meters, lined with sleeping quarters. Emergency lighting cast everything in dim red. Titan moved forward, then suddenly veered left toward the equipment bay, a large room where trainees stored gear, weapons, unloaded and locked, and personal belongings. The door was ajar. Webb approached, adrenaline sharpening every sense. Through the gap, he could see movement. A figure in dark clothing crouched near the weapons lockers, working on something with focused intensity. Not a trainee. Wrong posture. Wrong clothing, wrong everything. The intruder had a backpack open beside him and was attempting to force open a storage cabinet marked with hazard warnings, the kind that held training explosives, det cord, and blasting caps used for demolition instruction. Webb's tactical mind processed the implications in milliseconds: unauthorized entry, weapons access attempt, explosive materials. This wasn't vandalism or theft. This was something far worse. He raised his weapon. "Hands up, don't move!" The figure spun, and Webb saw the gun in the same instant the intruder fired. The shot went wide, punching through drywall. Webb dove right as Titan launched forward. 80 pounds of trained aggression moving faster than human reaction time. The Malinois hit the intruder center mass. Jaws locking onto the gun arm. Momentum driving both bodies into the storage lockers with a metallic crash that echoed through the barracks. The weapon clattered across concrete. The intruder screamed, trying to throw the dog off, but Titan's bite force was engineered by evolution and refined by training. Webb was on them in 3 seconds, knee driving into the intruder's back, hands securing wrists. "Titan, out!" The dog released and backed 2 paces, still locked in alert posture, ready to re-engage if commanded. Footsteps thundered in the hallway, voices shouting. Within seconds, the equipment bay flooded with armed security personnel, flashlights cutting through darkness, weapons trained on the scene. Senior Chief Ramirez pushed through, took in the situation, Webb restraining a suspect, blood on the floor, Titan standing guard over a dropped pistol, and his face went carefully neutral. "Someone want to explain what the hell just happened?" Webb looked up, still catching his breath. "Unauthorized intruder, Chief. Armed. Attempted to access explosive materials. My K9 detected the breach and tracked him here." Ramirez stared at the cut fence reports now streaming in over tactical radio, at the intruder's backpack containing bolt cutters and electronic bypass equipment, at the bullet hole in the wall 3 feet from where sleeping trainees had been moments before. His voice dropped. "You disobeyed a direct order, Petty Officer." "Yes, Chief, I did." Silence stretched between them, heavy with institutional weight. Then Ramirez keyed his radio. "Dispatch, lock down the base. We have a detained intruder and a potential security breach. I want every building swept and every access point verified." He looked at Webb. "Secure your K9 and report to my office. We're not done here." Webb nodded, but as security led the intruder away and investigators swarmed the scene, he couldn't shake one thought. If he'd followed orders, if he'd returned to patrol route, if he'd trusted the system instead of his dog, how many people would have died before sunrise? Chapter 3. The Interrogation Room. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service took over the case within an hour. The intruder, identified as Blake Morrison, former Navy enlisted with a dishonorable discharge 3 years prior, was transported to the NCIS field office in San Diego for interrogation. Webb and Titan were confined to quarters pending investigation, their roles in the incident documented, but their futures uncertain. By 0900 hours, the story had spread through the base like wildfire. A dog had detected what human security missed. A handler had disobeyed orders and potentially saved lives. The institutional machine was now deciding whether to punish the violation of protocol or acknowledge the catastrophic failure it exposed. Webb sat in Senior Chief Ramirez's office, still in his patrol uniform, Titan lying at his feet. The dog's head rested on his paws, but his eyes tracked every movement in the room. Ramirez leaned against his desk, arms crossed. NCIS confirmed Morrison bypassed 3 security checkpoints using stolen credentials and electronic countermeasures. He had detailed maps of the facility, timing charts for patrol routes, and enough materials in his vehicle to construct multiple explosive devices. Webb said nothing. "They're calling it a credible threat. Potential mass casualty event." Ramirez's voice was tight. If he'd accessed those training explosives, if he'd assembled a device inside that barracks... He stopped, jaw working. "You understand what I'm saying?" "Yes, Chief. You also understand that you violated a direct order. You abandoned your patrol route, ignored recall instructions, and engaged a threat without backup or authorization." "I understand." Ramirez pushed off the desk, pacing. "Command wants to know why a K9 handler made better threat assessments than our entire security apparatus. They want to know how someone with Morrison's profile acquired that level of operational intelligence, and they want to know what happens to you." Webb met his eyes. "I followed my dog, Chief." Titan alerted. He tracked. He detected a threat that our systems missed. I trusted his training. "You trusted your instinct over orders." "I trusted my partner." The words hung in the air. Ramirez looked at Titan, who hadn't moved except for his eyes. The Malinois watched both men with the calm intensity of an animal that knew exactly what it had done and felt no need to justify it. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. Ramirez exhaled slowly. The base commander wants to see you. Both of you. 1400 hours. He paused. Webb, you saved lives. No one disputes that. But you also broke the chain of command, and the Navy doesn't take that lightly. Whatever happens in that meeting, know that your actions are going to force some very uncomfortable conversations about how we do security. Understood, Chief. As Webb stood to leave, Ramirez added quietly, For what it's worth, if I'd been in your position, looking at that dog's alert, knowing what you knew. He stopped. I hope I would have made the same call. Webb nodded once, then led Titan out into the California sun, where the base was still processing what had almost happened and what one K9 had prevented. Chapter 4. The Commander's Office. Captain Richard Sutton had commanded the Naval Special Warfare Center for 2 years. A career SEAL who'd operated in 3 continents and understood threat assessment at the molecular level. His office reflected that experience: tactical maps, unit photos, and a shelf of challenge coins from teams across the community. When Webb and Titan entered at 1400 hours, the room already contained Senior Chief Ramirez, the base security officer, and a 2-star admiral from Naval Special Warfare Command, whose presence indicated this had escalated beyond local jurisdiction. Captain Sutton gestured to a chair. Sit, Petty Officer. Webb sat. Titan positioned himself beside the chair, statue still. The Admiral spoke first, voice carrying the weight of decades in uniform. Petty Officer Webb, I've read the after-action reports, reviewed the security footage, and spoken with NCIS. What your K9 accomplished in preventing this incident is remarkable. What you did in following that alert despite direct orders is problematic. Yes, sir. Walk me through your decision-making. At what point did you decide to disobey Senior Chief Ramirez? Webb chose his words carefully. Sir, when Titan alerted to the fence breach, his behavior was unambiguous. In 6 years of handling, I've learned to trust that alert. When I was ordered to return to patrol route, I had to make a judgment call between following protocol and following what my training and experience told me was a legitimate threat. You chose the dog over your chain of command. I chose to trust my partner's detection capabilities over institutional assumptions about threat probability, sir. The Admiral's expression didn't change. That's a diplomatic way of saying you thought you knew better than your superiors. With respect, sir, Titan knew better. I just followed his lead. Captain Sutton leaned forward. Petty Officer, we're not here to crucify you. We're here because your actions exposed a massive security vulnerability. Morrison had been surveilling this facility for 3 months. He knew our patrol patterns, our shift changes, our blind spots. He bypassed electronic security using equipment that cost less than $200, and the only thing that stopped him was a dog's nose. The security officer shifted uncomfortably. Sir, our protocols are based on proven methodologies. Your protocols failed, the Admiral interrupted. A disgruntled former sailor with basic technical skills penetrated one of our most secure facilities and came within minutes of accessing explosive materials inside a trainee barracks. If Petty Officer Webb had followed orders, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Silence filled the office. Sutton stood, moving to the window overlooking the training compound. The K9 program has been ancillary to our operations for too long. We treat dogs as supplementary assets rather than integral team members. This incident proves we need to rethink that approach. He turned back to Webb. NCIS wants to understand Morrison's planning process. They believe he may have had assistance, possibly insider knowledge. Your K9's tracking pattern His behavior during the apprehension, all of that is evidence. We need you to work with investigators to reconstruct exactly what Titan detected and when. Yes, sir. The Admiral stood. Petty Officer Webb, you're being formally reprimanded for disobeying a direct order. That reprimand will go in your record. He paused. You're also being recommended for the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal for preventing a potential mass casualty event. Your K-9 is being recommended for recognition under the Animals in War and Peace Medal of Bravery program. Webb felt the contradictory weight of both statements, punished and praised simultaneously, the military's way of acknowledging that sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. More importantly, Sutton added, you and Titan are being assigned to a joint task force reviewing base security protocols. We're going to redesign how K-9 units integrate with overall threat assessment. Your input will be critical. Understood, sir. As the meeting concluded and Webb led Titan out, he realized the institutional machine had made its choice, acknowledge the failure, honor the solution, and use both to force change. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Outside, Titan paused to look up at him, and Webb could have sworn the dog understood exactly what had just happened. Chapter 5. The investigation NCIS Special Agent Sarah Chen had spent 12 years investigating military crimes, but the Morrison case troubled her in ways most cases didn't. The level of operational planning suggested either extensive surveillance or insider assistance, possibly both. And the more she dug into Morrison's background, the more questions emerged. She requested Webb and Titan's assistance 3 days after the incident, meeting them at the evidence processing facility in San Diego. The K-9's tracking pattern had been preserved through GPS data and handler notes, creating a timeline that NCIS believed could reveal details Morrison wasn't volunteering. Petty Officer, I need you to walk me through Titan's behavior from initial alert to apprehension, Chen said, spreading maps and photos across a conference table. Every detail matters. When did he change pace? Where did he hesitate? What did you observe that seemed unusual? Webb studied the materials, Titan lying beside his chair. The initial alert at the fence line was immediate and decisive. No hesitation. But when we reached the maintenance path, he slowed for approximately 30 seconds near a utility junction. Why would he slow? Scent pooling. When someone stops moving, their scent signature concentrates. Titan was processing whether the subject had paused there. Chen marked the location on her map. Morrison claims he acted alone, but his phone records show encrypted communications with 2 unknown numbers in the weeks before the incident. If he had help, those helpers may have conducted surveillance along the same route. She pulled out crime scene photos from the equipment bay. When you entered this room, Titan went directly to Morrison. Did he alert to anything else? Any other scent signatures? Webb closed his eyes, reconstructing the moment. When I gave the command to engage, Titan moved without scanning the room. His focus was singular. If there had been multiple scent trails, he would have shown confusion or redirected. There was only one target. So Morrison was alone in the building. At that moment, yes, but... Webb paused, opening his eyes. Before we entered the equipment bay, Titan had a micro-alert near the hallway junction. Less than a second. I almost missed it. Chen leaned forward. What does a micro-alert indicate? Secondary scent. Someone else had been in that hallway recently, but the trail was older or weaker. Not an immediate threat, but notable enough for Titan to register. Could it have been base personnel? Maintenance workers? Possibly. But at 0445 hours, that hallway should have been empty. Barracks don't have scheduled maintenance during training cycles. Chen made notes rapidly. If someone helped Morrison scout the facility, they would have used the same access points. Titan may have detected residual scent from reconnaissance visits. She looked at Webb. Can your K9 distinguish between old and fresh scent trails? Not with precision, but he can prioritize threat assessment. Fresh, active scent gets immediate response. Older scent gets catalogued and dismissed unless I ask him to track specifically. I want to bring Titan back to the base, have him re-sweep the route under controlled conditions. If there are additional scent signatures we missed, finding them now could break this case open. Webb glanced at Titan. The dog's ears had pricked up at the change in conversation energy, ready to work. When? Tomorrow morning, 0600 hours, before the base gets too active. Chen gathered her materials. Petty Officer, your K9 didn't just stop an attack. He may have created the only physical evidence trail we have to find Morrison's accomplices. As they left the facility, Webb considered what Chen hadn't said directly. If there were insiders helping Morrison, they were still on base, still had access, and now knew their plan had been compromised. That made them dangerous in new ways. Titan seemed to sense his handler's tension, pressing closer as they walked to the vehicle. The dog had done his job perfectly, but the threat wasn't fully neutralized. Not yet. Chapter 6. The Second Sweep. At 0600 hours the following morning, Webb and Titan returned to the Naval Special Warfare Center under NCIS escort. Agent Chen had coordinated with base security to clear the patrol route, ensuring they could conduct the sweep without contamination from daily operations. The October air carried the same salt-sharp clarity as the morning of the incident. Titan wore his tactical vest and working harness, every line of his posture indicating he understood this wasn't routine patrol. Webb had spent an hour before dawn reviewing scent detection protocols, preparing the K9 for a tracking exercise that required precision beyond normal threat assessment. Chen stood at the original alert point near the southeast fence. We're going to let Titan work the entire route at his own pace. Don't give commands unless he needs redirection. I want to see where he naturally focuses attention. Webb unclipped the lead. Titan, seek. The Malinois moved forward, nose working methodically. He retraced his original path with eerie accuracy, following invisible trails that only his sensory perception could detect. At the utility junction, where he'd slowed during the incident, Titan stopped completely. His behavior shifted. Instead of moving forward, he began working a circular pattern, nose to ground, clearly processing multiple scent layers. Chen watched intently. What's he doing? Discriminating. There's more than one trail here. Webb moved closer, observing Titan's body language. He's trying to separate overlapping signatures. The dog completed 3 circles, then sat abruptly, the trained alert for explosive detection. Chen's expression sharpened. There's explosive residue here? Webb knelt, examining the area without touching. Or someone who'd handled explosive materials stood here recently. He looked up. This junction provides clear sightlines to 3 patrol routes, perfect observation point for surveillance. Chen radioed base security. I need an EOD team to the southeast utility junction immediately. Possible trace explosive contamination. While they waited, Titan remained in alert posture, confirming his detection. Explosive ordnance disposal arrived within 10 minutes. Their equipment detecting residue concentrations consistent with someone handling commercial explosives, the same type Morrison had in his vehicle. Someone stood here conducting surveillance, Chen said quietly. They'd handled explosive materials before arriving on base. She photographed the location meticulously. This is premeditation, reconnaissance, planning. They continued the sweep. At the maintenance path leading to Barracks Charlie, Titan alerted twice more. Once near a drainage access point, once at a parking area adjacent to the barracks complex. Each location offered tactical advantages: cover, concealment, sightlines. Morrison wasn't alone, Chen concluded. These are coordinated observation points. Someone helped him map this facility. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Titan reach those who still believe in honor. At the equipment bay entrance, Titan repeated his micro-alert from the incident. This time, with no active threat to prioritize, he followed the secondary scent trail 30 meters down the hallway to a janitor's closet. He sat, alerting. Chen opened the door carefully. Inside, behind cleaning supplies, she found a small notebook containing hand-drawn maps of the facility, patrol schedules, and personnel shift rotations. Her voice went cold. "This is insider intelligence. Someone with base access provided Morrison with operational details." Webb felt the implications settle like weight. "We have a security breach that goes beyond one disgruntled former sailor." Chen sealed the notebook as evidence. "Petty Officer, your K-9 just turned this from a prevented attack into a counterintelligence investigation." She looked at Titan, who sat calmly beside Webb, waiting for the next command. "I've worked with detection dogs for a decade. I've never seen this level of discrimination and tracking persistence." Webb rested a hand on Titan's head. "He's just doing what he's trained to do." "No," Chen said quietly. "He's doing more than that. He's telling us a story we didn't know we needed to hear. Now we have to figure out who else was writing it." Chapter 7. The insider NCIS moved quickly once they had evidence of insider assistance. Security footage was reviewed frame by frame, access logs were cross-referenced with shift schedules, and personnel with connections to Blake Morrison were identified and interviewed. The investigation centered on 3 individuals, but one name emerged with uncomfortable clarity. Petty Officer Second Class Ryan Torres, a logistics specialist who'd worked with Morrison 5 years earlier and maintained contact after Morrison's discharge. Torres had base access, knowledge of security protocols, and a documented history of financial difficulties that made him vulnerable to recruitment. More damning, his duty schedule positioned him near each surveillance point Titan had identified during times when Morrison could have conducted reconnaissance. When NCIS brought Torres in for questioning, he initially denied involvement. But when confronted with the notebook found in the janitor's closet, which contained handwriting analysis matching his service records, his resistance collapsed. "Morrison approached me 8 months ago," Torres admitted, his voice hollow. "Said he wanted to expose security failures, prove the Navy didn't care about protection after pushing him out. He offered money. A lot of money." Agent Chen sat across from him, expression neutral. "So you helped him plan an attack on your own facility?" "He said it was just reconnaissance. That he wanted to write an exposé, get media attention." Torres's hand shook. "I didn't know he was actually going to—" He stopped. "I swear I didn't know about the explosives." "But you knew he was planning unauthorized entry. You provided maps, schedules, and access intelligence. You created the vulnerability he exploited." Torres had no response. The case expanded. NCIS discovered Morrison had connections to anti-government extremist groups, forums where disgruntled veterans shared grievances and, occasionally, crossed into radicalization. The attack on the Naval Special Warfare Center would have been symbolic, targeting the elite unit Morrison blamed for his discharge, using insider knowledge to expose institutional weakness. But Morrison and Torres had made one critical miscalculation. They'd accounted for human security patterns, electronic surveillance, and patrol schedules. They'd never considered a Belgian Malinois with instincts honed by millennia of evolution and refined by months of training. Captain Sutton called Webb to his office to brief him on the investigation's progress. "Torres is cooperating fully, providing details about Morrison's planning. NCIS believes there may be additional individuals involved, but Titan's sweep gave them enough evidence to secure prosecution." "What happens to Torres?" Webb asked. Courts-martial. Likely conviction for conspiracy, providing aid to unauthorized personnel, and breach of security protocols. He's facing years in military prison. Sutton paused. But here's what keeps me awake. Torres had been on this base for 3 years. He'd passed security reviews, background checks, psychological evaluations, and no human detected his betrayal. But Titan detected Morrison. Exactly. Your K9 didn't catch Torres directly, but his tracking revealed the pattern that exposed him. That's threat detection at a level our human systems can't match. Webb looked down at Titan, who'd been silently observing the conversation. He just follows the scent, sir. He doesn't make moral judgments about betrayal or loyalty. Maybe that's why he's better at this than we are, Sutton said. He sees the truth without the institutional blindness we've developed. The statement lingered. The Navy had built elaborate security architecture based on human intelligence, electronic monitoring, and procedural compliance, but those systems had failed to prevent Morrison's planning or detect Torres's betrayal. A dog's nose had accomplished what millions of dollars of technology couldn't. That uncomfortable truth was forcing naval special warfare to rethink everything about how they assessed threats and who they trusted to find them. Chapter 8. The Testimony. Blake Morrison's courts-martial convened 6 weeks after the incident, held in a military courtroom in San Diego with heightened security and media attention. The prosecution built its case around conspiracy to commit terrorism, attempted destruction of government property, and weapons charges. Petty Officer Webb was called to testify about the events of that October morning, his role in detecting and stopping Morrison, and Titan's capabilities as a detection K9. It was the first time a military working dog's actions would form the centerpiece of a terrorism prosecution. The courtroom fell silent as Webb entered with Titan at his side. The judge had granted permission for the K9 to be present, recognizing that separating handler and partner would compromise Webb's ability to provide accurate testimony. The prosecutor, a Navy JAG officer, led Webb through the timeline methodically. Petty Officer described Titan's initial alert at the fence line. Immediate and unambiguous, ma'am. His entire body posture changed. Ears forward, head lowered, focus absolute. That behavior indicates threat detection. What did you observe that made you trust this alert over your supervisor's assessment? 6 years of handling experience. Titan has never given a false positive on threat detection. His track record is flawless. The defense attorney stood for cross-examination, attempting to undermine the K9's reliability. Petty Officer Webb, isn't it true that dogs can be confused by environmental factors? Weather, wildlife, residual scents? Titan is trained to discriminate between target sense and environmental noise. His training includes exposure to diverse conditions, specifically to prevent false alerts. But you chose to believe an animal over human judgment and direct orders. That's a dangerous precedent. Webb met the attorney's eyes. I chose to trust training and empirical evidence over institutional assumptions. Titan's detection prevented what NCIS classified as a credible threat with mass casualty potential. The evidence supports his reliability. The prosecutor redirected. Petty Officer, in your professional opinion, what would have happened if you'd followed the order to return to patrol route? Webb paused, choosing his words with precision. Morrison would have accessed training explosives, assembled an explosive device, and likely detonated it in a barracks housing 200 personnel during sleeping hours. Casualties would have been catastrophic. The courtroom absorbed that statement in heavy silence. Agent Chen testified next, detailing the investigation Titan's tracking had enabled. She described the surveillance points, the insider assistance, and the elaborate planning Morrison had conducted. Without the K9's detection capabilities, we would have had minimal physical evidence and no lead on the conspiracy aspect. When Morrison took the stand in his own defense, claiming his intent was protest rather than violence, the prosecution presented the explosive materials found in his vehicle, the maps and schedules Torres had provided, and the timeline showing Morrison entering the barracks building with clear access to sleeping trainees. "You brought a loaded weapon, bypass equipment, and materials for constructing explosive devices onto a military installation," the prosecutor stated. "You targeted a facility housing trainees and active duty personnel. What part of this was protest?" Morrison had no credible answer. The verdict came after 4 hours of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Sentencing would follow, but the outcome was clear. Morrison faced decades in federal prison, and Torres's separate courts-martial had already resulted in a 15-year sentence. As Webb led Titan from the courtroom, a Navy captain he didn't recognize approached. "Petty officer, I'm with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. We need handlers like you and K-9s like Titan operating at the team level. Would you be interested in discussing an assignment?" Webb looked down at his partner, who sat calmly observing the conversation, unaware that his actions had not only stopped an attack, but opened doors for military working dogs across the entire Special Operations community. "Yes, sir, we'd be honored." Chapter 9. Legacy of Instinct. 3 months after Morrison's conviction, the Naval Special Warfare Center held a ceremony that drew personnel from across the Special Operations community. The event marked the official integration of K-9 units into SEAL team operations and the presentation of the Animals in War and Peace Medal of Bravery to a Belgian Malinois who'd redefined what it meant to be part of the teams. Webb stood at attention in dress uniform, Titan beside him, wearing a ceremonial vest marking him as a decorated military working dog. The Pacific wind carried the sound of flags snapping against poles and the distant rhythm of training cadences. Captain Sutton addressed the assembled personnel. "We gather to honor extraordinary courage and to acknowledge institutional failure. Petty Officer Webb and his K-9 Titan prevented a terrorist attack not because our security systems worked, but because they trusted instinct and partnership over protocol." He paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. "This incident forced us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we assess threats, who we trust to find them, and whether our reliance on technology has made us blind to capabilities we've undervalued." The Admiral from Naval Special Warfare Command stepped forward. "The K-9 Integration Initiative, which launches today, represents the most significant change to Special Operations threat assessment in 2 decades. Military working dogs will be embedded with SEAL teams, given equal status with human operators, and their handlers will receive training equivalent to team members." He approached Webb and Titan. "Petty Officer Marcus Webb, for exceptional courage in preventing a terrorist attack, for trusting your training and your partner against direct orders, and for actions that saved countless lives, you are awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with Combat Vive." Webb accepted the medal, but his attention was on Titan, who'd remained perfectly still throughout the ceremony despite the crowd and noise. "And for Titan," the Admiral continued, kneeling to attach the Animals in War and Peace medal to the dog's vest, "for detection capabilities that exceeded all human and electronic security measures, for courage under fire, and for being the first military working dog to prevent a confirmed terrorist attack on U.S. soil. You are recognized as a national asset and honored by this command." Titan's tail wagged once, briefly, then returned to professional stillness. The ceremony concluded with announcements about policy changes, revised security protocols, enhanced K-9 training programs, and new research initiatives studying animal threat detection capabilities. Morrison's attack had failed, but its legacy was forcing evolution. After the formal proceedings, Webb found Agent Chen in the crowd. "How's the broader investigation? NCIS identified 3 additional individuals in Morrison's network, all arrested, all facing federal charges. Your K9 sweep gave us the thread that unraveled the entire conspiracy. She smiled slightly. Titan's testimony in those cases is being used to establish precedent for K9 evidence in national security prosecutions. He's just a dog doing his job. No, petty officer. He's a warrior who proved that sometimes the most sophisticated threat detection technology is a nose that evolved over 50 million years. She nodded toward Titan. Take care of him. The special operations community needs more like him. As the crowd dispersed, Webb walked Titan to their favorite spot, overlooking the ocean. The Malinois sat beside him, watching waves crash against rocks, seemingly unconcerned about medals and policy changes and the institutional transformation his actions had catalyzed. "You know what you did, don't you?" Webb asked quietly. Titan looked up at him, brown eyes calm and knowing. "You proved that loyalty isn't about following orders blindly. It's about trusting your partner, even when everyone else says you're wrong. Especially then." The dog leaned against his leg, a gesture of simple partnership that had saved lives and changed history. Across the base, new K9 teams were beginning training that would prepare them for integration with SEAL operations. Handlers were learning to trust instinct over protocol, to see their partners as equals rather than tools. Security systems were being redesigned to incorporate biological detection capabilities alongside electronic monitoring, all because one handler chose to follow his dog into the darkness, trusting that sometimes the best intelligence comes not from satellites or sensors, but from a nose pressed to the ground and a heart loyal beyond question. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of They Called Him Just a Dog until he took down an armed intruder inside the Navy SEAL training camp. See you in the next one.